School officials in Illinois want to improve students' math skills, and Governor J.B. Pritzker is making plans for the celebration of America's semi-quincentennial anniversary, a word you might need both math and Latin to decipher. From Capital News, Illinois, it's Friday, December 5th, 2025, and this is Capital Cast. Hello and welcome back to Capital Cast, a regular podcast of Capital News, Illinois. I'm Peter Hancock, and I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving holiday last week. A little more than a year ago, the Illinois State Board of Education announced plans to develop what it calls a comprehensive numeracy plan. The goal is to boost students' math skills across the board. It's no secret that many people find math to be a very difficult subject. Many adults readily admit that they're no good at math or that they're just not math-oriented. And there's plenty of data to back that up. On standardized tests, Illinois students, like their peers nationwide, routinely score lower in math than they do in reading and writing. And American students overall routinely score lower in math than their peers in many other industrialized countries. So why is that? And what, if anything, can be done to turn those numbers around? To shed some light on the issue, I reached out recently to some experts in the field, including Beth MacDonald. She's a professor of math education at Illinois State University, where, among other things, she trains prospective teachers in the practice of teaching math to young children in early elementary grades. I spoke with her by phone and started off by asking her a basic question. Why are Americans so bad at math? Or why do they think they're so bad at math?
There's a lot of trends that have shown that internationally we've not performed well. So that's not like a suspicion that we are relatively weaker at math in some areas compared to our international counterparts, right? So there's a lot of research has been done since the late 90s and the early 2000s that have compared instruction qualitatively from, I think there was Japan and possibly there's a European country, maybe Germany, and then the United States. And they found that instruction in the United States utilized a lot of their time on review. And less time on allowing children to construct and to develop meaningful concepts in mathematics and to use those. For instance, I observed a lesson in, I guess it was around 2010 at a Japanese school in Connecticut. And the lesson was in third grade. There were about 45 students in the classroom. And the teacher simply took a drink of water from a bottle, set it down, and asked the children to figure out how much water he drank. And they spent a bulk of the time exploring that and solving that. And then the remainder of the time, the children worked together to try to figure out how their strategies were similar or different. And they grouped together into groups where they had similar strategies. And they presented how they discovered how much water he drank. And the teacher helped them make connections across those ideas. The reason why I use that as an example is because Japanese schools have been using something called lesson study for decades, which is an action-based research model to inform educational change. And that means educators are part of the research, and researchers are researching on educators in schools. They're working in partnership with them. Teaching is a cultural act, and for us to make change, we have to engage our educators so that our cultural understandings of what it means to teach and learn mathematics changes as well. And that hasn't happened fully.
Yeah, so that brings up a question that I had. Is the problem, is it something in the way we teach mathematics in America, or is there something culturally about us that makes it difficult for us to learn mathematics?
it's about how we teach mathematics. I would argue we believe that we need to learn how to perform well on an assessment. When No Child Left Behind Act came into being, it further polarized a lot of our educators. We had some that were trying to utilize conceptual approaches and inquiry-oriented instruction where students' reasoning guided our instruction. And there were some that were using the textbook primarily, and some that were somewhere in between. They were not quite one place or the other. There are a lot of people who were in that space. And then when the No Child Left Behind Act came about, it scared teachers, and they realized they needed to have their kids perform well. They were using those scores to determine if the schools received money and resources, and if the parents should send their kids to those schools.
Right. They were high stakes tests as far as the schools were concerned and individual teachers. There was a lot on the line with those. And there still is.
And so, there is, yeah. And so what we've done now is when you go into a school, educators have to, you'll see educators all on the same page of the curriculum on the same day. And they're being held accountable to stay on pace with the curriculum. So what we've removed now are the need to even understand where our kids are at in their own learning.
I was wondering, do we also, I've heard there's kind of a generational problem too, because when kids go home with homework, if they have a problem with their math homework, their parents are of no help because their parents didn't get it either, because our low performance level in math has been going on for generations now, that the parents can't get really engaged in helping their kids with math.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a huge problem, but what we did years ago, we need to change. What we did years ago is we used mathematics as a gateway. If you can't do well in this class, then you shouldn't go into a mathematics field. There's a new movie that came out a year ago called Count It Out. I don't know if you've seen that. No. And it talks a lot of, it's worth watching. They have free screenings at times if you can find a way to see it. But it talks a lot about how during the space age, we use mathematics as a filter. If you can't do this mathematics, we don't want you in our space program. We don't want you in a STEM area. And now, if you're not in a STEM area, you, A, have very few career options, and B, you are not at the table making decisions about who should be in a STEM area. So a lot of the perceptions and the realities around mathematics learning are sometimes absent because they were never brought to the table, right? Mm-hmm. So there's an issue there. There's a lot of tension around how do we be more inclusive. But then there's almost like this hazing mentality. Like, I never did well in math because I didn't perform well, but I'm going to expect my students to also perform in the same way I did because that's all I know about math. You know? Yeah. So there's a lot of that as well where our educators are really struggling as to how to teach mathematics with students at the center, but then parents are also struggling as to how to make sense of their students' reasoning when they do use that at home. So because they never reasoned through mathematics themselves. So it provides a lot of generational issues for sure. And I would argue even particular systemic issues with regard to marginalized populations. You know, they also have been prevented from having access to mathematics quite often.
Okay, so from a policymaker standpoint, if you're on the State Board of Education or you're a state lawmaker, how do we turn this around? What needs to go into a numeracy plan to get people to change their attitude about math and approach it with more confidence?
Well, and I do have to say, I've looked at the numeracy plan. I've been to the listening tour. I went back and looked at it again today with regard to some national initiatives to think about this more holistically. I mean, there are 4 components of the numeracy plan, and I think they've done a nice job describing these components. They're talking about like vision and purpose, placing students at the center, shifting that paradigm from one where we're defining mathematical competence as being able to perform mathematics in a particular way. Sometimes we ignore diverse ways of reasoning. We don't want to do that anymore. So and then like looking at the policy around how to teach or how students learn numeracy is another component. And I think that's also something that needs to be addressed. They, again, place student reasoning at the center. So like shifts have to happen where educators are being given the professional, what's the word I'm thinking of? The professional ability, professional freedom is really what I want to say, to understand how they can support students without utilizing the curriculum solely. And what that means is that they need to sit with kids and listen to them reason and utilize their strategies to inform their instruction. Instead of saying, I finished page 128B, I need to now do 128C tomorrow. We don't want the curriculum to guide our instruction. We want our students' reasoning to guide the instruction. And that's a huge shift for educators because for decades we've been told, or they've been told, we should not be doing this. And then the next section, which I think is also really important, is the professional learning component. They did a great job of utilizing action research models, like I was telling you, like lesson study is mentioned explicitly in the plan. Mm-hmm. And those I think are going to be great ways to shift, again, educators' understandings of why is it we're teaching mathematics in this way, and how are our students learning from these by utilizing these instructional approaches. And then the last one is looking at frameworks for effective leadership and looking at how those frameworks can draw from communities and different cultural expertise within and around the schools and the school districts. So I think they're doing a great job with the numeracy plan so far with regard to like how policy can change, but we need some money behind a lot of these initiatives, and we need to start having intentionality around how we're going to help our educators and our educational leaders better understand how kids' learning can guide our instruction in mathematics.
Do you have confidence that at some point, I mean, when we look at state report cards now, I mean, consistently in every state, the proficiency rate in ELA is always higher than it is in math. And even across most demographic groups, the math proficiency rates are lower. Do you have confidence that at some point we can bring the math proficiency rate up to
if we're focusing on it?
Yeah.
I think we can if we're focusing on it. I think we need to also do a lot of work in connecting preschool to kindergarten. A lot of preschool teachers, I just met with my undergrads, and they're not seeing the mathematics in their classrooms that the kids are doing. They're outside in free play, which is great. They should have free play, but there's a lot of mathematics in their free play, and helping kids make connections to those. Like, gosh, you are climbing the jungle gym. How many ladder rungs high is that jungle gym? Can you figure that out for me? Mm-hmm. So these types of activities don't have to be, traditional classroom-based activities, but we're not focusing on that in the preschool area. Doug Clements said at one point in an interview years ago, he's a national leader in early childhood mathematics education, and he said that literacy was the bully of preschool. And it's kind of silly to think of it that way, but in many ways, he's talking about like how early childhood educators will primarily focus on literacy, and because of that, we're building these proficiency, these opportunities to build higher proficiency rates in later grades, because we're beginning literacy at a much younger age than we are mathematics. So I think we're gonna need to start to. I am confident, but I do also think that as a society, we need to start supporting our early childhood educators and connecting their experiences to kindergarten more intentionally and in mathematics.
And so it really does start at the early childhood level.
Yes. My work primarily focuses on 3 and 4-year-olds number understanding, and you would be surprised how capable young children are and how we diminish that quickly by kindergarten and first grade.
Yeah.
We don't realize how rich their number understanding is, and we have much lower expectations for them than we would for literacy.
That was Beth MacDonald, a math education professor at Illinois State University. In other news this week, a significant anniversary is coming up, the 250th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. There are apparently a number of ways to say that in Latin, but the one that seems to be sticking is semi-quincentennial. If you think about it, quincentennial would be a 500th anniversary, semi-quincentennial would be half of 500 or 250. Anyway, that's the word that people are using, and plans are now underway for Illinois to take part in the celebration. Governor J.B. Pritzker spoke at a kickoff event this week at Navy Pier in Chicago. Here's a little of what he had to say.
From early Native American tribes to the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement to today, Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan and Barack Obama and Ida B. Wells, the story of Illinois has always been the story of America. We are, after all, the most American of American states.
For more on that, we turn now to CNI reporter Maggie Dougherty, who is based out of Chicago and covered that event for us. Maggie, first of all, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Okay, so what more can you tell us about the semi-quincentennial anniversary celebration here in Illinois? What's going to be going on?
Yes, the governor joined the Illinois America 250 Commission this week, and they announced those plans. Much of that, the committee says, is designed to spotlight and uplift local stories from across Illinois' 102 counties. That will include a youth art contest for young artists to reflect on what 250 years of America means to them, a statewide call to action around volunteering, and an oral history project to archive Illinoisans talking about the anniversary. The project will also focus on uplifting the voices of tribal groups whose roots in Illinois predate the signing of the Declaration by tens of thousands of years and celebrating their contributions. The Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, the Department of Natural Resources, and the Office of Tourism have also partnered with the Illinois Association of Museums for a little tourism initiative, which will distribute keepsake quote-unquote passports to encourage visitors to explore historic and cultural sites across Illinois. So it's a little less flashy than President Trump's celebrations for July 2026, which I believe are expected to include a UFC match at the White House. But the focus will be on local voices in Illinois, celebrating the past 250 years and looking forward to the next 250.
So for those of us who actually remember the bicentennial celebration back in 1976, we will remember it was an incredibly commercialized, sometimes over-the-top celebration of American patriotism. But nevertheless, I mean, it was this huge commercial and cultural event where people were marking the anniversary and celebrating American democracy and American history. Is 250th anniversary, is it going to be on that kind of scale that we saw?
Yeah, I guess it's hard to say. I mean, I expect that you'll be seeing that logo with the Ferris wheel and 250 and Illinois in the middle of the zero. I expect you'll see that everywhere. I think it's going to be a lot of red, white, and blue. But it seems to be the focus is trying to be at least more on uplifting voices, storytelling, art, and culture. So we'll see.
Now, there was some discussion, as I understand it, at that event about the bicentennial celebration and about the way we've talked about American history in the past. It sounds like they're trying to make up for some deficiencies in past interpretations. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, definitely. There were conversations about how voices in the past have not, diverse voices in the past have not necessarily been included in these celebrations, especially thinking about tribal groups, and how, you know, Native communities in Illinois have lived here for a very long time, and their contributions have not always been recognized. And so there's going to be some, I think, storytelling initiatives to try to counteract that and bring in more voices than in the past. At least that's the plan.
Okay, and you mentioned a minute ago something about Ferris wheels, and I noticed that the Ferris wheel did kind of play a major role there at the announcement on Navy Pier. Tell us about Illinois' connection to Ferris wheels and why that's going to be a big part of the event.
Yeah, well, Pritzker said that it was to honor the tradition of innovation and I think entrepreneurship in Illinois. The Ferris wheel, to my memory, was created for the World Fair in Illinois, in Chicago, and was sort of a symbol of Illinois' greatness to the world stage to rival the Eiffel Tower and the like. So I think that that is part of it. I know that there were some concerns raised about whether it's too Chicago-centric of a symbol, but Pritzker doesn't seem to think so.
Okay, well, we can look forward to several more months of hearing about that as the anniversary comes closer. Meanwhile, there was also some other news. Governor Pritzker did a bill signing this week having to do with vaccinations, and that is actually kind of timely in the way it coincides with some national news. Why don't you tell us a little bit about the bill that he signed?
Yes, absolutely. That bill, House Bill 767, will allow Illinois Department of Public Health to set its own guidelines for vaccines, considering recommendations from experts at the World Health Organization and other doctors and scientists, not just what the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention requires. That bill also gives more teeth to the committee that makes those vaccine guidelines, which will now be able to override recommendations from the Illinois Director of Public Health if they feel that the director's diverges from the committee's guidelines. The bill mandates that all state-regulated insurance plans cover vaccines recommended under those state guidelines, and it also lowers the minimum age for children to receive certain vaccines, like flu and COVID-19 shots, at pharmacies from 7 to 3 years old, something that Public Health Director Samir Vohra said will make life more convenient for parents who want to keep their children healthy. As you mentioned, it's pretty timely. This all comes after months of you could say unraveling or major changes at the CDC under Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who really made a name for himself by questioning the efficacy of vaccines and claiming that they cause autism, despite a lack of any real scientific evidence to suggest that. He fired the director of the CDC and all 17 members of the CDC's Independent Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, replacing them with a new handpicked group, many of whom share Kennedy's vaccine skepticism.
Okay, so there has been a lot of controversy over vaccines and especially about Secretary Kennedy's approach to vaccines, which was really kind of the impetus for this bill. The fear was that CDC is no longer going to be an objective and reliable source for scientific information and assessments about vaccine policy. And so lawmakers, well, first, I guess it was the governor issued an executive order earlier this year to set up this new board that would be able to make recommendations about vaccines in Illinois. And now that this new law kind of codifies that. And then tell us about what happened at the federal level here on today, on Friday.
Yeah, like you said, just today, the committee voted, the federal committee who makes recommendations to the CDC, voted to stop recommending a birth dose of the hepatitis B vaccine, which is traditionally given within 24 hours of birth, and then again 1 month and at 6 months of age. That had been the case for 30 years, and decades of research confirmed the vaccine's safety and efficacy, but the panel voted to recommend delaying that birth dose until the child is 2 months old. Proponents of that approach say that the birth dose isn't needed if the baby's mother is screened and tests negative before birth, but many public health experts disagree and raise major concerns about this, saying that the screening can miss cases and that the effect of missing those cases can be really devastating. According to Dr. Sean O'Leary, who is chair of the American Academy of Pediatrics Committee on Infectious Diseases, a child infected with hepatitis B at birth has a 90% chance of developing chronic active hepatitis B, and of those 90%, 25% of them will go on to die of the disease. So that's all to say, while the federal guidelines are changing and rolling back many years of standard vaccine practice, Illinois will be able to maintain its own recommendations or set new ones.
Okay. Well, thank you for covering that for us. And that is all the time we have for this edition of Capital Cast. Capital Cast is a production of Capital News Illinois, a public affairs reporting project of the Illinois Press Foundation, with funding from the Robert R. McCormick Foundation. Until next time, this is Peter Hancock with Maggie Dougherty on behalf of the entire Capital News Illinois team, saying thank you for listening.